It is a very effective design, isn't it? I think the Sea Devils, they just work very well. The masks work well, the colouring is good.
Yeah.
Well, hello and welcome back to the Shallow Proclamation. My name's Paul, and joining me today is my co-presenter,
Thomas.
I just thought I'd try and say something different. I realised I got into the habit of just saying, joining me as always is Thomas. And
Co-presenter.
do you remember when we first started doing these, and every week, no matter what we did, we'd somehow just completely balls up the intro?
Yeah, would you say we've got it nailed by now?
I know, I'm worried it's too slick now.
Yeah.
Maybe it's lost the charm that it once had. It's too professional. I think that's probably what people think when they watch our videos. It's too professional.
That is... yeah. If there's one criticism people would have with this channel...
it's just a bit too well done.
Yeah, just too like, put together. And, too insightful.
Yeah, deep, profound insights.
So what is she going to see?
I think it's...
Oh, we still don't see it.
There we go. There's nothing to see.
Clever.
Nothing to see here, people. Nothing to see. I mean, in all fairness, in a diving bell like that, it could have been that there'd been some kind of pressure accident and the Doctor was splattered across the top of the diving bell.
Oh man, the stories of that sort of stuff happening.
Oh yeah, have you ever heard of the bifold dolphin?
No, what was that?
That was a big diving disaster.
Right.
Rapid depressurization. If you look it up, it's pretty gruesome.
Oh, I think you might have mentioned this one, but it was over quite quickly for those concerned, wasn't it?
Oh, they would never even have known. No.
Yeah.
They would. No chance.
The humans will provide it. We shall attack their base.
I kind of like it because the mouth doesn't move, but it doesn't need to.
Oh, it does move a bit, doesn't it?
Oh, does it?
It does
a
open
little.
and shut. It's not in sync with the...
Yeah, I guess that's what I mean.
Dialogue
Like it's almost more eerie, the fact that this speech is coming out, but you can't see the lips move. It's almost like a ventriloquist or something.
Good afternoon,
And that's probably sort of the limitations of the time, really. I imagine if they could have done it, they would have made it absolutely fluid. But it creates its own effect.
Yeah, it's almost sometimes the limitations actually make the monster more creepy.
It is a very effective design, isn't it? I think the Sea Devils, they just work very well. The masks work well, the colouring is good.
Yeah. Yeah, they work really well as a kind of group, don't they?
Yeah.
As well. That little holster, I do like it. It's kind of like a little bum bag or something, isn't it?
Yeah. They work surprisingly well even in broad daylight.
Yeah.
They look great in their base, kind of in the dark and stuff, in the shadows, like they did in the Sea Fort, but they do work as effectively out in those very, natural light.
Yeah, because they've got that kind of rugged, dripping, slimy look. You'd be... If you saw one of those in real life, you would be pretty freaked, wouldn't you?
You would, yeah.
Was it's like, yeah, some of the Doctor Who aliens, if you saw in broad daylight, sorry, these aren't aliens, but yeah, some of the Doctor Who creatures might be a bit less scary in broad daylight, as you say.
Space babies.
I'm not thinking of going down there again. Doctor, it's
The
far
poor
too dangerous.
snot monster.
I'm doing the only thing possible, Captain Hart, and we're to avoid a major conflict.
Suppose they won't listen to you.
Wow.
Whoa.
This is shaping up to be a very good story, I think.
Yeah, so what was that? That was episode 5, right?
5 of 6, is it?
Exactly, 5 of 6. Now, we would kind of expect in a 6-parter to have had episodes 4 and 5 to be the slightly slow-burning episodes where things kind of start to slow down a little bit as they try and desperately pad it out. But it hasn't felt like that to me.
No, not me neither. I thought that was incredibly well done, actually. Love the submarine stuff. I believed, yeah, really nice combination of the model shots and the interiors. Like, you kind of believed that they were on a submarine that was getting stuck by the force field underwater, which is a hard thing to pull off on a TV show made in the 70s. So, yeah, no, it had that kind of authenticity to it, didn't it? Because of the real Navy stuff, because of the kind of, you believe that the sea devils have come out of the sea because they're dripping and slimy and covered in these nets. And yeah, sometimes you're being asked to believe that a creature has come from a certain place, and you're like, it looks a little bit too clean for it to be that. But you can actually believe that that's something that's emerged from the ocean, can't you? I think.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, and I think you're right. There's a matching of the shots from the location stuff and the stuff on the boats, the Navy stuff, into those interior shots, which just gives it a coherence, which just goes to show that even on, what would have been a relatively small budget, although I know in this case the Navy themselves sort of waived any fees for it, but it just shows what the show can do when you have someone behind it who puts some thought into it and tries to make it interesting, doesn't just sort of do it by the numbers, but really tries to kind of make it all hang together. And you notice, don't you? I think that's the thing about Doctor Who as well. We've had a couple of stories, not so much this season, because this season's been quite strong so far. But you notice the difference, don't you, between, because you get a story which is obviously directed by someone and written by someone, and then the next story is written and directed often by someone else. And so you often notice the difference much more starkly than you would, I guess, than if you just had a whole season that was one person, the mastermind of one person,
Yeah.
So you kind of, I think it was when we started watching, it was the Demons, wasn't it? I think after Colony in Space, and we were kind of saying it's like night and day, that difference. Yeah, and this has just felt so far like a really good sort of coherent thing. And I imagine some people might say, oh, I feel that episode 4 and 5, it slows down a bit, that it's just a lot of like shots of like the the Navy and things blowing up in the water and to have had time. I could see why someone might say that. But I think my attitude to it is I don't mind stuff kind of filling the time if it's entertaining and done well, and I think it works well. I think it does entertain. I don't sit there and get bored thinking that, gosh, they're just slowing down the story to drag this out. It has worked there. I mean, we've basically introduced it. Was it at the beginning of this episode or at the end of the last episode that the politician, the parliamentary guy, arrives? He's a completely new addition, isn't he, to the story? So there's an attempt to freshen it up a bit.
Yeah, that's interesting, isn't it? Yeah. And yeah, that's a good point, because with the modern era, obviously, if you have like a 45-minute episode, and for the most part, unless it's a two-parter, which is quite rare, that's the story, isn't it? It's contained within that episode. You've got to introduce the new world, new characters, the creature or whatever, the threat, and it's got to be dealt with, etc. And there's something quite tight about that I like about the modern era format, where it's like there's something quite nice about a really good self-contained episode like Midnight or something. But what is nice about the classic era is, yes, you probably could do a cut of most classic era stories that tells the story effectively in 45 minutes, but there's something about, like you say, dwelling in the area. I mean, unless we've seen some stories where there has been stuff where we've thought, okay, maybe this is a bit unnecessary. It feels like they're trying to pad it out. But even if it's not necessarily, advancing the plot heavily, just like spending time with the character, getting to know the world better, if it's well done and engaging, as you say, it's actually quite nice to have quite a good amount of time getting to know these characters and locations, isn't it? And you feel like after you've watched a 6-parter, if it's done well, you've got to know a new world, it's Earth, isn't it? But a new set of set of characters quite well and believed their plight.
Yeah. There is that sort of, that longer form does give you the opportunity to do more. I think there is there is a cut of this which was shown as sort of like an omnibus edition at some point. I don't know if it was later in the 70s or in the early 80s, which I think is sort of a 90-minute version. So effectively they've taken it and chopped it down. So, I mean, yeah, as you say, you obviously could do it and still tell a coherent story. But just because you can chop something down doesn't necessarily mean that the extended version of it isn't worth the watch.
Yeah.
So...
Yeah, exactly. Just because you can cut something out and it still makes sense doesn't mean that it's just like completely superfluous fluff.
Yeah, and there's been... I can't remember what discussion it came out of, but I do remember early on, sort of in the Hartnell era probably, we were talking about this kind of thing, and someone saying, like, in the comments that there's almost an obsession now with kind of streamlining everything to the point that you never have any of those little quirky extra things that you might have got before, because there's the notion that everything must serve the story entirely.
Yeah.
And I can see, there's a truth to that everything should be, you want things to be tight and work in that way, but actually having the space allows you to do a lot of nice things as well that you might not have been allowed to do if you just really had to ramp it down to exactly the shortest amount of time you possibly could.
It's a bit like watching the extended edition of Lord of the Rings, isn't it?
Right,
like,
yeah.
You get little extra nuggets like Aragorn trying Eowyn's soup.
Yes.
And it's fun to have more material because of the world building, and that was so good. It's fun to be able to get those extra little bits that,
and for me, like in that example itself, I mean, I can't remember the last time I watched Lord of the Rings and it wasn't the extended editions.
Interesting.
I don't
know if I've
actually edition.
I don't think I've even seen the theatrical release.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely saw them in the theatre, and I probably did see them once or twice once they were released. But I remember I've still got, a lot of my DVDs I chucked away, or I kept all the DVDs, but in in like a folder, got rid of all the boxes. But I've still got my Lord of the Rings DVDs, the extended edition ones that came with the booklets, like 5 or 6 disc kind of thing.
What's a DVD?
Yeah. Yeah, so I mean, solid so far. Let's hope that episode 6 doesn't disappoint when we get there.
Sticks the landing.
Absolutely, that's the key thing now, isn't it? You got to stick the landing.
Do you reckon they'll combine it with the demons and have a sign that says "Sea Devil's End"?
Nice.
That'd be nice, wouldn't it?
Wow. Well, I guess we'll leave it there. Let us know what you're thinking so far down in the comments. We like to engage with that. Do join Discord server. That's free. You can find that, a link in the description. I can't remember now. I feel like I've said... Did I say this at the beginning of the episode, or did I say that at the end of the last episode, Thomas?
You tend to do it at the end. I think you did it at the end.
Yeah, I can't remember. Anyway, and if you want the full reactions to this, you can join our Patreon, and there is a link for that in the description as well, and a couple of tiers in there, a few little extra bits for people. So do have a look at that if you'd be interested. But regardless of that, whatever you choose, we shall see you soon, hopefully, for episode 6 and rounding off this story. Until then, bye-bye.
Goodbye.